At Thanksgiving, Mom smiled across the table and said, "Your sister's wedding was perfect. When's yours?" I swallowed, looked her right in the eye, and said, "Had mine." The room went silent, because they all knew exactly what wedding I meant. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. The silence around the table wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Forks paused in midair. My aunt's jaw literally dropped. My mother blinked twice, fast, like she was trying to reset a frozen screen. Brenna, my sister, stiffened beside her fiancé, fingers tightening around her wine glass. They never expected me to say that. They certainly never expected me to bring that marriage back into the room. I hadn't seen my family in almost 2 years. I only showed up today because my dad begged me, said he missed me, said we were all adults now and could talk things out. But the moment I walked through the door, I could feel old roles snapping back into place. Brenna beaming like a princess. Mom fussing over her. Me being the invisible one, the afterthought, the one they spoke to only when they needed something. Nothing had changed. Not a thing. So when Mom made her little comment, loud enough for everyone to hear, pretending to be innocent while fully intending to embarrass me, something in me clicked. Maybe it was the exhaustion from years of being the scapegoat. Maybe it was the therapy finally teaching me not to swallow every wound. Or maybe I was just done protecting people who never protected me. I didn't plan to expose anything today. I honestly didn't. I wanted to eat my turkey, make small talk, and leave early. But as soon as her words hung in the air, "When's yours?" I felt that old ache, the one tied to the betrayal I spent months trying to survive. And suddenly, I knew I wasn't going to keep quiet. Everyone stared at me, waiting, confused. They wanted to pretend they didn't know about the marriage. They wanted to pretend they weren't involved in the aftermath. But they knew. Every single person at that table knew how Brenna and Callum had blown my life apart. And they were hoping I'd continue pretending it never happened. Not today. So I sat up straighter, wiped my fingers on the napkin, and let the truth settle in the room like a storm cloud. My mother opened her mouth again, probably to scold me for making things awkward. But she didn't get the chance. My dad looked at me with this mix of concern and guilt, and whispered, "Harper, are you ready to talk about it?" I took a breath. For once I was. I grew up in a quiet suburb in Oregon, the kind with tree-lined streets, PTA moms, and families that looked perfect from the outside. Ours looked perfect too, until you stepped inside and realized perfection had a favorite child, and it wasn't me. From as early as I can remember, Brenna was the son our family revolved around. She was the pretty one, the charming one, the one teachers adored and neighbors complimented. Mom would say, "Brenna just has that spark," while glancing at me like I was a dim lamp flickering in a corner. I learned to live in that shadow, convincing myself it didn't hurt. I was the responsible one, the homework helper, the errand runner, the child who never caused trouble because causing trouble meant getting blamed for destroying the peace. Whenever Brenna messed up, I was the one told to fix it. If she forgot her lunch, I left class to take it to her. If she got caught lying, I was told not to overreact because she's younger and still learning. I was only 2 years older, but I might as well have been her third parent. Dad tried to keep things balanced, but Mom made it very clear who the princess was in our home. Despite everything, I loved Brenna. Truly. I defended her. I covered for her. I comforted her when she cried, even when the reason she cried was something she did to herself. I thought that was what good sisters did. I thought love meant giving until it hurt. And it always hurt. I remember one time in high school when Brenna stole my favorite sweater. I found her wearing it at school, smiling like she owned the world. When I confronted her, she burst into tears so loud and dramatic that a teacher came over. Suddenly I was the bully, the jealous big sister, the one who should know better. I apologized to keep the peace. That moment became a pattern. Her chaos, my cleanup. Mom always reinforced it. "Harper, she looks up to you," she'd say. "Let her take your things. You're stronger than she is." But being stronger didn't mean I was unbreakable. Every time I was brushed aside, every time Brenna's feelings were prioritized over my reality, something chipped at my self-worth. I learned to swallow emotions whole, to stay quiet, to not expect anyone to choose me. All I ever wanted was genuine affection. A hug that didn't come with conditions, a compliment that wasn't followed by a comparison, love that didn't require sacrificing myself. That longing shaped everything about me. It made me overly forgiving, overly patient, overly hopeful. It made me believe that if I gave enough, I'd finally be enough. I didn't realize it then, but my upbringing trained me for betrayal. It taught me to excuse red flags, to accept being second place, to think crumbs of affection were full meals. So when Callum came into my life and treated me like I mattered, I clung to him with a heart that had never been held properly. I didn't know I was walking straight into the deepest wound of my life, carved by the very sister I spent years protecting. I met Callum Reed on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind where the sky feels too heavy and the world looks washed out and tired. I was working on a design proposal at a small cafe near my office when he walked in, shaking water from his hair, laughing as he tried to fold his soaked jacket over his arm. He asked if he could share my table because the cafe was packed, and something about his easy smile made it impossible to say no. He introduced himself, and within minutes we were talking like we had known each other for years. He was a civil engineer, ambitious, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in my work. No one had ever asked me so many questions about my dreams before, let alone listened with real attention. For the first time in my life, someone wasn't comparing me to Brenna or treating my accomplishments like background noise. Callum made me feel seen. He made me feel chosen. Our conversations flowed naturally, and when he walked me to my car that night, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. We started dating soon after, and with each passing week, I fell deeper. He wasn't perfect, but he was steady, caring, and patient with the parts of me that had been neglected for so long. When I finally introduced him to my family, Brenna was surprisingly enthusiastic. Too enthusiastic. At first, it felt good, like maybe for once she was genuinely happy for me. She kept saying things like, "Harper, he's amazing. You did great," as if he were some prize I'd stumbled upon. She asked him endless questions about his projects, his travels, his hobbies. I tried to shrug off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. After all, Brenna was always extra. That was her personality. But soon her interest grew strange. She'd text him directly with funny memes or random questions, then tell me she was just bonding with her future brother-in-law. She'd show up at places where Callum and I planned to be, claiming it was coincidence. At family dinners, she'd sit beside him, leaning in too closely, laughing a little too hard at his jokes. Everyone noticed, especially Mom, who called it adorable. Dad gave me a look once, a quiet warning, but neither of us said anything. Callum reassured me whenever I asked about it. He'd take my hands and say, "Harper, she's your sister. She's just excited for you." And I believed him. I believed him because I wanted to. Because trusting him felt like breathing. Because after years of being overlooked, I finally had someone who felt like mine. I let Brenna's behavior slide, brushing aside every red flag with excuses I didn't realize were protecting her more than myself. I didn't think my own sister could be a threat. I didn't think I needed to guard my relationship from someone I had spent my whole life defending. But looking back, the signs were there from the beginning. The lingering glances, the private jokes, the quiet electricity between them. I just refused to see it. I was too busy falling in love to notice I was being quietly replaced. When Callum proposed, it felt like the world finally stopped working against me. He took me to the same cafe where we first met, got down on one knee with shaky hands, and told me he couldn't imagine a future without me in it. I cried real, deep, grateful tears, because for once something beautiful was mine. Our family celebrated, and for a short while life felt almost perfect. I held on to that feeling with both hands, trying to ignore the quiet cracks forming beneath it. The first red flag was small. Harmless, even. I walked into the kitchen during a family dinner and found Callum and Brenna whispering, heads close, voices low. The moment they saw me, they jerked apart like guilty siblings caught stealing cookies. Brenna laughed too loudly, brushing it off with, "We were planning a surprise for you." Callum nodded, smiling, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of nerves I'd never seen before. I chose to ignore it. Love makes you blind, but hope makes you stupid. Then came the deleted messages. I noticed them accidentally. Callum left his phone on the counter, and a notification popped up from Brenna. But when he picked up the phone, the message was gone. Deleted instantly. I asked him about it, trying to keep my voice steady, and he told me not to snoop, that Brenna had been asking him about gift ideas for my bridal shower. He said he deleted the message because he didn't want me to peek. It made sense. It sounded reasonable. But something inside me twisted anyway. Brenna's accidental appearances became more frequent. If Callum and I went out for lunch, Brenna would just happen to be at the same restaurant. If he went to the gym, she was there too. If we planned a weekend shopping trip, she miraculously needed things from the same mall. Every time I questioned it, she'd act wounded. I can't spend time with my future brother-in-law? Wow, Harper. I thought you'd be happy I care. Mom, of course, sided with her. She's just excited for you, she'd say, as if excitement explained everything. The night I finally confronted Callum, it felt like stepping off a cliff. My voice trembled as I told him I didn't like the closeness, the secrets, the way Brenna inserted herself into every part of our life. He listened quietly, then pulled me into his arms and whispered, "You're overthinking again, love. You've always taken too much responsibility for your family's behavior. Brenna is harmless." It was smooth, comforting, manipulative. It worked. And when I confronted Brenna, she burst into tears so violently I almost apologized immediately. She accused me of not trusting her, of being jealous, of pushing her away, just when she wanted to be close before my wedding. Mom rushed in and wrapped her arms around Brenna like she was a wounded child. "Harper, how could you say such things? She adores you." In that moment, standing alone while they clung to each other, I realized something chilling. I had no allies. Not in my family. Not in my own engagement. I was walking toward my wedding with a sinking feeling that something was terribly, dangerously wrong. The morning of our courthouse wedding should have felt calm, simple, maybe even peaceful. It wasn't a big ceremony, just a few witnesses, our parents, and a quiet lunch afterward. I woke up early, did my own makeup, and stared at my reflection, trying to convince myself everything was going to be okay. My stomach was tight, but I blamed nerves. I kept telling myself that every bride feels jittery, right? That every doubt was just fear, not truth. But then Callum was late. Not a little late, an hour late. I stood outside the courthouse in my cream dress, watching cars pass, checking my phone every 30 seconds. My dad tried to stay calm for me, pacing in slow circles. Mom muttered something about me being too dramatic. Brenna wasn't there yet, which should have been a relief, but somehow made everything worse. My thoughts spiraled. Was he having second thoughts? Was he stuck in traffic? Was he? No, I wouldn't let myself think it. I couldn't. Not today. When my phone buzzed, I jumped like it was a lifeline. But the message wasn't from Callum. It was from an unknown number. Just one photo. One single, soul-crushing image. Callum and Brenna. Kissing. His hands on her waist. Her fingers in his hair. The timestamp? 1 hour earlier. 1 hour. The exact time I had been standing outside believing he was on his way to marry me. My breath shattered in my chest. The world tilted, blurry and wrong. My dad reached for my arm, asking what happened, but I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Couldn't even cry. I just stared at the picture, my heart thudding like it was trying to escape my body. The betrayal wasn't a theory anymore. It wasn't a suspicion or a red flag. It was real. It was happening. And it was happening today. For a few long seconds, I felt myself sinking, like something heavy was dragging me underwater. But then something sharp and cold slid into place inside me. A switch. A quiet steel. After a lifetime of being blindsided, manipulated, and dismissed, something in me finally snapped into clarity. If they wanted to betray me, fine. But I wasn't going to collapse in front of them. I locked my phone, smoothed my dress, stood up straighter. By the time Callum finally jogged up the courthouse steps, breathless and apologizing, I was steady. Too steady. He kissed my cheek, said he slept through his alarm, made some joke about wedding jitters. I looked him in the eye and smiled. I don't think he realized then that something inside me was already gone. We walked inside and said our vows. I held his hands like I wasn't imagining them touching my sister. I repeated my lines clearly, calmly, like I wasn't memorizing every detail of how I'd ruin them both. Callum thought he was marrying a woman in love, but he was actually marrying a woman who had just decided she was done being anyone's victim. And on our wedding day, behind my soft smile and steady voice, I began planning my revenge. The first few months of our marriage felt like living inside a beautifully decorated lie. On the outside, I played the loving, steady wife, cooking dinners, asking about his day, kissing him goodbye in the mornings. But inside, I was ice. Every time he smiled at me, every time he touched me, every time he said, "I love you," I felt that photo burning behind my ribs. I knew what he was. I knew what he was doing. And I knew what I had to do. Callum thought I had forgiven him for being late on our wedding day. He thought my silence meant trust. He didn't know silence was the only way to catch a liar. I started small. Whenever he went to shower, I checked his phone, not desperately, not frantically, but methodically. Every text from Brenna went into a hidden folder on my tablet. Screenshots of messages, late-night calls, deleted chats. Nothing escaped me. I learned he'd saved her name in his phone under a coworker's name. I learned they had been meeting at a motel not far from our apartment. I learned the affair hadn't stopped after our wedding. If anything, it had intensified. At night, after he fell asleep, I'd sit in the living room with the lights off and record voice notes of every lie he told that day. Then, slowly, I started recording our conversations. Little things, his excuses, his contradictions, the slip-ups he didn't realize he made. I'd ask innocent questions at breakfast, then save the audio. He never noticed. Callum always underestimated me. Meanwhile, I began separating myself financially. I opened a private bank account, redirected a portion of my income, changed my beneficiaries, moved my savings into an account he didn't know existed. I even talked to a lawyer just for information and learned exactly what I needed for a clean, indisputable divorce. Proof of infidelity, proof of financial misconduct, proof of emotional manipulation. So I collected everything. I installed a small camera in the living room, hidden inside a decorative bowl, after noticing Brenna visited when I wasn't home. She acted like it was normal, like she had every right to just walk into our apartment. When I watched the footage and saw Callum smiling at her the way he used to smile at me, it didn't hurt the way I expected. It just clarified things. They weren't sorry. They weren't conflicted. They were bold. And bold people make sloppy mistakes. On weekends, when Callum thought I was working, I followed him instead. I stayed far enough not to be seen, but close enough to learn everything. I watched him meet Brenna in parking lots, restaurants, stores. Sometimes I'd take pictures. Other times, I just memorized the scenes. Every betrayal became a piece of ammunition. The more I gathered, the calmer I felt. Revenge wasn't fiery or dramatic. It was patient, cold, precise. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I didn't warn him. I let him dig his grave one lie at a time. And day by day, file by file, I built the perfect case. One that would destroy him, expose her, and free me without leaving a single crack for them to escape through. The morning I decided to end it, the air in our apartment felt electric, like the calm before a storm. I had rehearsed every word, every movement, every subtle way to keep my composure. I wasn't doing this for anger or revenge in the petty sense. I was doing it to reclaim my life, to make sure the betrayal didn't get to write the ending. I called Callum and told him we needed to discuss paperwork before anyone else arrived. That alone threw him off, but he never guessed what was coming. Brenna showed up first, as usual, with that practiced smile, flirty and warm, like she owned the place. My mother followed, chattering about why we should all sit down and have a calm conversation. They didn't suspect a thing. I stood in the middle of the living room, holding a folder thick with proof, heart steady, and let them settle around me. "Harper, what is this about?" Callum asked, lounging on the couch, trying to act casual. I ignored him and opened the folder, pulling out a printed photo first. Callum and Brenna kissing, time-stamped, clear as daylight. I let the silence hang for a moment before letting it sink in. Then I hit play on my phone. Audio recordings of Callum lying to me, conversations where he discussed plans with Brenna, screenshots of deleted messages. I let everything play out in front of them. Every lie, every secret rendezvous, every betrayal they thought I hadn't noticed. Brenna froze, then shook violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Harper, it's not what it looks like," she stammered, her voice cracking. But her protests sounded hollow even to me. Callum's face turned red, then pale, then defensive. "This isn't fair. You're twisting things." He tried to spin it, but I cut him off. I pulled out the last page in my folder, the one that would crush the final illusion. "Mom, remember the family savings account you trusted Brenna with? The one you said was for emergencies." I looked straight at her. "She's been using it to cover Callum's debts, to keep him afloat while he lied to me. That's why we couldn't catch him earlier, because she was hiding his mess with our money." The room imploded. My mother's face went pale, like someone had punched her in the gut. Brenna sank to the floor, shaking, sobbing, her golden child halo shattered. Callum stumbled back, wide-eyed, no words left to defend himself. The air was thick with shock, disbelief, and a raw, bitter sense of betrayal that stretched from one side of the room to the other. I stood there quietly, letting the truth do the work I had spent months preparing it for. No yelling, no begging, no dramatic confrontations. Just facts, evidence, and the unvarnished reality of their choices. Every lie, every manipulation, every act of selfishness exposed in front of everyone who mattered. Finally, I placed the divorce papers on the coffee table, sliding them toward Callum. "Sign here. It's over." He didn't move, didn't even speak. I didn't wait for him. I turned to leave, feeling a strange mix of relief and power. The betrayal, once hidden in shadows, was now fully visible. And for the first time in years, I felt completely untouchable. They had broken me before, but today I broke free, and they would remember it forever. After I left the apartment that morning, the weight of months of planning finally lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I didn't have to tiptoe around lies, hide my feelings, or excuse the cruelty of people who should have protected me. I knew then and there that I wasn't going back, not to Callum, not to Brenna, and certainly not to the family that had allowed this to happen. I cut them off completely, changing my numbers, deleting old contacts, and refusing every call or text. Silence became my sanctuary. I packed what little I owned into a single car and drove to a new city, somewhere I had never been, somewhere no one knew my name or my history. The first nights in my tiny apartment were quiet and lonely in a way that felt almost sacred. No one was there to criticize my choices, to undermine my feelings, to whisper about how things should be. I slept in the stillness, letting myself feel the full range of emotions I had been denying for so long. Anger, grief, fear, and finally relief. I threw myself into work. Interior architecture had always been my passion, and now, without the shadow of betrayal looming over me, I had the mental space to create. I designed spaces that reflected calm, strength, and clarity, values I was learning to reclaim within myself. Slowly, clients came, projects succeeded, and I found a rhythm in building something tangible that belonged entirely to me. Each completed project felt like a small victory, proof that I could trust my instincts, make decisions, and see them through without compromise. Friendship came next, cautiously but genuinely. I joined a local book club, attended design workshops, and started saying yes to invitations I might have declined before out of fear or self-doubt. I met people who didn't know my past and didn't judge me for it. They became my chosen family, people who supported me, laughed with me, and reminded me I was worth kindness and care. I learned to receive love as well as give it, a lesson I hadn't understood growing up. Therapy became a cornerstone of my new life. For months, I talked through every memory, every scar, every betrayal I had endured. I cried more than I thought possible, screamed into pillows, and slowly untangled the years of guilt and misplaced responsibility I had carried. I began to understand that my worth wasn't tied to anyone's approval. Not Callum's, not Brenna's, not my mother's. I started setting boundaries, practicing self-respect, and identifying the warning signs I had once ignored. Living alone wasn't lonely anymore. It was liberating. I cooked meals for myself, redecorated my apartment with my own sense of beauty, and made plans that had nothing to do with anyone else's expectations. I traveled on weekends, explored neighborhoods, and discovered parts of myself I had buried under years of compromise. Step by step, day by day, I reconstructed my life, piece by piece. I became stronger, wiser, and more confident in my own voice. The betrayal that once defined me now fueled me, reminding me why I could never settle for less than I deserved. I was no longer the girl who bent to others' whims. I was Harper Lowell, unshakable and whole, learning to love herself first, fiercely, and without apology. The Thanksgiving table was set perfectly, like every year, golden candlesticks, cranberry sauce in a delicate dish, roasted turkey steaming in the center. But this year, the tension was different. I wasn't here to blend in or keep the peace. I wasn't here to smile politely while my family critiqued my choices or patted Brenna on the back for her achievements. I was here to speak, to be seen, and to finally tell my truth. Mom glanced at me across the table, lips pursed as if to say, "Behave." Brenna sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap, clearly nervous. Callum wasn't there. He was irrelevant now, but his shadow hovered in every glance they exchanged. I took a breath and began. "I've been quiet for a long time, longer than I should have been," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But today, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened after my wedding, after I married Callum." I watched their faces shift. Mom's eyebrows shot up, Brenna's jaw tightened. I discovered the betrayal, the affair, the lies, and I didn't collapse. I didn't scream or beg. I collected evidence, protected myself, and I divorced him. And yes, Brenna, you were involved. You used our family savings to cover his debts. You lied to me, to everyone. Brenna's eyes filled with tears, a shaky attempt at apology forming on her lips. Harper, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I held up a hand to stop her. Save it. I've heard apologies before. I've seen manipulations dressed as remorse. What matters is that I survived. What matters is that I reclaimed my life. Mom's voice came, tight and controlled. Harper, you have to move on. You can't keep dragging this up. It's the past. We're all trying to heal. I shook my head, slow and deliberate. Move on? You mean pretend everything was fine, like it always was? Pretend the gaslighting, the favoritism, the betrayal never happened? No. I won't move on from something that tried to erase me. I won't sit quietly while the truth is ignored. I lived through it, and I own it. Every bit of it. And I refuse to be silent anymore. Brenna's tears fell faster now, her face pale, her voice trembling. I didn't realize. I know you didn't, I said gently but firmly. And that's the problem. You never saw, you never listened, you never cared enough to notice what I was feeling. But I noticed. I still notice. And I am not hiding anymore. Not from you, not from Mom, not from anyone. The room went quiet again, but this time it was different. It wasn't tension or fear, it was recognition. My family could feel the weight of my words because they were real. I wasn't yelling or attacking. I wasn't begging for validation. I was stating facts, owning my story, reclaiming my voice. For the first time, I didn't feel like a child swallowed by their world. I was Harper Lowell, finally seen, finally heard, and finally untouchable. The truth was out, and I was free. I stood from the table, brushing crumbs off my lap, and let the silence settle over the room. I didn't wait for anyone to respond. No one was going to validate what I'd just said. I didn't need them to. My voice had been heard, my truth had been spoken, and that was enough. I'm leaving, I said softly, but with a firmness that made even Brenna flinch. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need anyone to tell me I'm enough. I know it. Mom opened her mouth to argue, but I shook my head. No, this isn't about arguing. This is about me finally stepping out of your shadows. I'm done. I grabbed my coat from the chair, shoulders straight, spine unbending. Brenna looked at me, tears in her eyes, as if she had only now realized that her golden child status couldn't cage me anymore. She wanted words, maybe a fight, maybe forgiveness. I gave her none. I didn't know her anything. As I walked toward the door, Dad followed silently. Once we were in the hallway, away from the sharp glances of my mother and the quiet murmurs of Brenna, he put a hand on my shoulder. His eyes were soft, wary, but there was a sincerity I hadn't seen in years. Harper, I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have seen. I should have protected you. I failed, and I know it. I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at him, really looked, taking in the lines of worry on his face, the weariness in his eyes. Part of me had expected him to say something like, "It's complicated," or "Let's forget the past," words that would have excused all the years of neglect and favoritism. But he didn't. He took responsibility. And then, in a way I hadn't expected, he smiled slightly. I'm proud of you, Harper. Proud of the strength you've shown. Proud of the life you're building. It hit me in a way that no apology could ever truly reach. I realized then that the approval I had been seeking my whole life, from my family, from Brenna, even from Callum, was irrelevant. What mattered was the approval I gave myself, the respect I claimed for my own heart, my own choices, my own future. I opened the door and stepped outside. The cold air bit at my cheeks, crisp and sharp, but it felt invigorating, alive. I drew a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs, filling every hollow space left by years of betrayal and silence. Relief washed over me, not because I had received closure from my family, but because I had given it to myself. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their love to feel worthy. I had reclaimed myself. I walked down the steps, coat collar turned up against the wind, each step lighter than the last. The city stretched before me, streets bustling with life, possibilities, and moments yet to be lived. For the first time in my life, I was not defined by their mistakes, their favoritism, or their betrayal. I was defined by me, and in that cold, clear night, I chose my future on my own terms. Free, unshakable, and fully, unapologetically Harper Lowell. Do you think Harper made the right choice by cutting ties with her family? Or should she have tried to repair things? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to hear what you think. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new one.